Hi, and welcome to my video where I introduce how I did my NBody Extreme Gold Points project for Project Zero. So the challenge, or the gold points problem I decided to take on, was to add the ability to control a spacecraft that is subject to gravitational forces of the objects in the solar system. So let me first show you a demonstration, and then I'll break down the changes I made in order to implement this. So I'm just going to take this one. And basically, you can run any simulation with any text file and be able to run the spaceship the same way. And so the way you edit the command is instead of running NBody, you run NBody Extreme for the same command. And so as you can see in the middle of my standard draw window, there's the Death Star, which I can move with WASD. And as you can see, it gets like sucked around the suns in the solar system and gets sort of launched around. And I can also move it with, as I mentioned earlier, WASD. So that was kind of a short simulation, so I'll run it one more time just so I can show you more specifically. So first I'm going to be pressing up, and as you'll see, the Death Star tries to escape up out of the sun's rotation. And now I'll press down, and then left, and then right. And if my Death Star gets too far out of the solar system, I've also implemented one more feature, which is I can recenter it into the middle of the screen just by pressing 0. So as you can see, the Death Star is gone. I press 0, and it's back in the center, recentered around the sun, and affected by its gravity. Okay, cool. That's enough for simulations for now. Let me break down how I implemented these features. So I wrote a few notes here. So the two main changes I made were to a Body Extreme and NBody Extreme. So Body Extreme was a bit more complicated, so I'll start with that. Body Extreme is basically a child class of body. I decided to make it that way because I wanted to reuse a lot of the primary methods we used in body. For example, calculating forces, getting distance, all those basic features stay the same. The only real difference is that it has two more instance variables, which is the X and Y directional thrust, which I increment with WASD. As you can see here, I used standard draw's isKeyPressed method, as well as with key events constants VK underscore W underscore A underscore S and underscore D to indicate whether WASD were pressed. And if W was pressed, I'd say the thrust is increased in the positive Y direction. In contrast, if I press S, then thrust in the Y direction is decreased. And I use thrust as sort of another way to talk about acceleration. In the regular NBody program, we use the force divided by the mass of the planets to calculate the acceleration, and I just simply add on the thrust values scaled by some scaling factor in order to determine the acceleration in the X and Y directions. Other than that, I also use the same isKeyPressed except with VK underscore 0 to recenter the spaceship. I use the Death Star .gif or .gif provided to us in our images folder, or the standard whatever resources for us to use. Also, a few methods I overwrote just to get around some issues where I overwrote the get force exerted by X and exerted by Y, because those had in the denominator the distance between the two planets. So if you did X dot get force exerted by Y, it'll use the distance between planets X and Y. And the way we circumvented that in the regular NBody was to see if the planets were the same. Obviously, if they're the same planets, you don't want to consider the force between them. So, but since the spaceship is not any of the planets, the way I got around this was by checking if the spaceship was within some small distance, well, small relative to like the 10 to the negative 11 solar system we're working, 10 to the positive 11 solar system we're working with. And if it's within some small distance, which would cause the force to be some magnitude of like 10 to the 32, I would just say that the force between the planet and the spaceship was ignored. As you can see earlier, when I was hovering around the sun, I wasn't just immediately ejected for being like 3 feet within the sun to some random part of the universe. Also, in order to use Body Extreme, I also had to create a new class called NBody Extreme, which declared and instantiated a Body Extreme object, which was the spaceship, and would just update it with the same procedures as the other planets would. Oh, I think I forgot to mention in Body Extreme, I also overwrote the update class for the body because obviously the acceleration is no longer just calculated by force over mass. It's calculated by force over mass plus the thrust indicated by the key presses, WASD. And yeah, velocity was still calculated based on the acceleration times dt. Oh, whoops. And the change in xy position was still calculated by the velocity times dt. All right, that's basically how I implemented my gold points part of this project. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.